Doug Weiss posted, and I read, "Today I lost my wife Joni. There are no words that really capture the weight of that sentence or the grief that comes with it. She was deeply loved, and the space she leaves behind is impossible to put into words. I know many people loved her and will want to reach out, and I'm incredibly grateful for the prayers, support, and kindness already being shown." Today we're shifting the focus away from Doug Weiss, and trust me, there's plenty to unpack there, but instead let's dig into Jonathan, Susie Lamb, and the wild part Jimmy Evans played in all of this.
Jonathan and Susie let me know that Jonathan was called by Tom Callender today, just after 2 p.m. in their Dallas time zone. And it was not to ask him to come to the hospital. It was to let him know that his mom had passed. Tom let him know that it was Joni's wishes that it was to be kept quiet. And so Jonathan was not given an opportunity to see his mom, to make peace.
In the wake of losing his mother, Jonathan and Susie Lamb took their grief to the public eye. But while we're here breaking things down, something major is brewing on Instagram right now, and it stems from a post Jonathan Lamb made just yesterday. One follower snapped, left a fiery comment, and that single moment set off a chain reaction. We're talking nearly 200 replies from people all over the world, opinion clashing with opinion, pain meeting pain. Because Jonathan and Susie Lamb both posted about Joni Lamb's passing across their platforms, as any child naturally would after losing a parent. Despite everything that went down between them, they still honored her publicly. But not everybody took it that way. Then, over on X, formerly Twitter, Susie Lamb made a post that stopped a lot of people in their tracks. Many felt the timing was completely off, that this was simply not the moment for that kind of message, and the internet did not hold back.
Now, let me read to you Susie's post. Susie posted on X, this is 4:29 p.m. yesterday, I'm reading verbatim, "Thank you. We weren't informed of anything. We were down the road, but weren't given a call to say goodbye. We forgive them. Thank you for praying for Jonathan. I have a problem with this."
And then there's Facebook. Jonathan Lamb's page is absolutely flooded right now. The comments section is a whole battlefield. People are going at it, emotions are through the roof, and honestly, what's being said over there paints a pretty telling picture of just how divided people are when it comes to everything that went down in that family. And don't even get me started on YouTube. That's a whole other conversation, and trust me, this video is going to be a long one. But before we get into all the media backlash, let's pause and look at Doug Weiss's post first. It has been 2 days. 2 whole days since Joni Lamb passed, and this man was her husband. He made a post just a day ago, or maybe he uploaded an old video titled, "Who is responsible for cheating in a relationship?" Just his usual relationship content, dropped like absolutely nothing had happened. A day, maybe even just hours after his wife died. Want to know what he had to say in it?
Who's responsible for cheating? That is a big question. Who's responsible for cheating? Now, I'm Dr. Doug Weiss, and for the last 40 years, I have helped couples who experience infidelity from sexual relationships outside their marriage, infidelity with the pornography issues, people getting involved in those kind of situations. Also, the type of infidelity that comes from being married to yourself, called intimacy anorexia, where you starve the other person of spiritual, emotional intimacy. All of those are forms of being unfaithful towards somebody.
This man has been repeating the same lines for 40 years, and every time he does, it's strategic. It's about sounding credible, building trust, making sure nobody stops to question what's actually going on behind the scenes. But after watching the video, it hit me. This was old content, a recycled clip pulled from his archive and pushed out at this particular moment. And I'm still trying to figure out why. Why that video? Why right now? For context, Doug Weiss did eventually post about Joni Lamb's passing, but only after that video went up. Now let's get into Jonathan's post, because that's where things are really getting heated. But before we do, I need to say something important. Some people are so wrapped up in their own bias that they're arguing backwards. No evidence, no logic, just emotion and misplaced loyalty to a narrative that's already been debunked. And others are firing right back at them, calling out the hypocrisy of defending everything Joni Lamb did while she was alive, then turning around and going after her own son at his lowest point. The comment section is a full-on battlefield, and we're going to walk through some of it together before we get to the main person who's been behind all of this from the very start. One follower dropped a comment that sent people over the edge. Parents are flawed, but we are commanded to love them and honor them anyways. Your rejection of your mother, no matter what excuse you tell yourself, it will haunt you, and it should. Guess how I know? Do not think that you will stand before the throne of grace and he will take your side like the people you have surrounded yourself with these last few years. No, you will stand there alone. Thankfully, you will be covered with the blood of Jesus, and he will be there as well. But dear brother, all I can say is repent now while you're still alive. A lot of people thought that comment crossed a serious line, and the replies came fast. I respectfully disagree with your perspective and believe that seeking truth and forgiveness is essential in this situation. Over on Instagram, Jonathan kept it simple. Thank you for your prayers, saying God would carry them through. But even that wasn't enough for some. One person fired back, saying, I pray you repented from all you put your dear mum through. The world mourns her loss. You hurt her so much. Joni, one of the best women God created. Rest easy, sweet Joni. Rest from all the pain Jonathan and Susie put you through here on earth. We love you, Joni. The responses to that comment were just as strong. One person saying, well, no matter what, I would never ever record my own mum and expose her like that. I would give it all to God, and if needed, I would take the blame. Above all, I would deal with family problems in private. I don't know when the world became so lost that most people are applauding the way Jonathan, Susie, and her parents recorded Joni without her knowledge and little by little released the recordings to keep the story more interesting. I can't know if Joni was right or wrong. I wouldn't vow for her sincerity, and her actions were certainly dubious, but nobody seems to be innocent in this story. Shame on you for exposing your mother like that. Shame on you. Others jumped in from different angles, some from the child abuse perspective, others pointing out that nobody in this story comes out completely clean. Now, let's talk about Jimmy Evans, because this is the conversation nobody's really having. Everyone's focused on Joni Lamb, Doug Weiss, Jonathan, and Susie, and those conversations matter, but nobody's talking about the system. And until you understand the system, none of this makes complete sense. Jimmy Evans is the key. 40 years in ministry, 40 years of marriage counseling, the man other pastors turn to when they need real authority behind a decision, a heavyweight in Christian circles whose name alone commands respect. Now watch what he actually did, because the order of events tells the whole story. Marcus Lamb dies. His widow, just weeks into grief, tells Jimmy Evans she has feelings for a man she already knows, a man who is still married to someone else at the time. And instead of telling Joni to sit down, grieve her husband, and give God time to speak, Evans launches an investigation. He conducts private sessions with Doug Weiss to determine whether his divorce from Lisa Weiss is biblically justified, and he decides it is. 3 months later, Evans is on Daystar in front of millions, justifying the engagement between Joni and the newly divorced Doug Weiss, and in doing so, essentially describing Lisa Weiss as someone who had abandoned and emotionally abused her husband. Lisa Weiss wasn't in that room, wasn't invited, wasn't consulted, wasn't given a single chance to respond to what was being said about her on national Christian television. Evans just kept going. 3 months after that broadcast, he officiates the wedding. He stands at the front, pronounces them married, and tells the audience that in 40 years of ministry, he has never seen a couple pursue a relationship with such integrity. 40 years of ministry, his exact words. Then, 31 days after that wedding, 31 days, Evans walks into a private meeting with Jonathan and Susie. The reason? Jonathan had refused to read a viewer comment on air that praised his mother's marriage. He said it would go against his conscience. He asked for 24 hours to pray about it. 24 hours. And Evans, the marriage expert, the man with 4 decades of helping people find middle ground, told Jonathan 11 times in that one meeting that his mother was the voice of God to him, that his conscience was an idol, and asking for time to pray was the equivalent of witchcraft. 11 times, 31 days after officiating the wedding. Does that sound like someone operating in the Spirit of God, or someone operating in the spirit of a system? Because here's what people keep missing. Evans wasn't an outsider who wandered in and caused damage. He was already inside this family. He played golf with Marcus Lamb. He stood at Jonathan's own wedding. Joni called him a spiritual big brother. So when he sat across from Jonathan and called his conscience an idol, it wasn't a stranger doing it. It was the man who had spoken covenant words over Jonathan's own marriage. That's not just overreach. That's a deep and very personal betrayal. But here's the truth that reframes everything. Evans isn't the root problem. He's a symptom. The real problem is the system he was serving, the Moses model, the doctrine of covering and submission, the belief that one leader at the top hears from God, and everyone below hears from God only through that leader. And anyone who dares to question, anyone who asks for 24 hours to pray, is stepping outside the covering and into spiritual danger.
This system didn't show up at Daystar when Evans arrived. Marcus Lamb built Daystar on this exact foundation. He was the untouchable apex, the founder, the visionary. Accountability only moved downward, never up. When his affair came to light, the system protected him, packaged it, and managed public perception. The system was already there. Evans just stepped into it and kept it running. And when Marcus died, the system didn't grieve. It looked for a new apex. Joni stepped right into that vacancy, not because she was uniquely corrupt, but because the Moses model was the only structure she had ever known. It was the water she'd been swimming in since 1982. Her own words said it plainly. Who is my accountability? God is my accountability. That is the Moses model speaking through her. And here's what breaks my heart about Jonathan in all of this. He grew up inside that system. It shaped him from childhood. And yet, when that same system was turned against his daughter, his conscience, his wife, he said no. He said no to the man who stood at his own wedding. He said no knowing it would cost him his position, his income, his family, his relationship with his mother. He asked for 24 hours to pray and was told that asking was witchcraft, and he still said no. That is not stubbornness. That is not rebellion. That is one of the rarest things you will ever witness inside a system like this. A man who chose God over the system that raised him. Evans has since moved on. He shifted to his end times ministry, called 2024 his best year ever, and has never publicly addressed his role in the divorce evaluation, the engagement announcement, the wedding, or that July 11th meeting. He just kept moving. And now, Joni Lamb is gone. So let me leave you with 3 things this entire story is telling us, loudly. First, systems outlive their builders. Marcus didn't build Daystar intending for his son to be fired for having a conscience, but the system doesn't care about intentions. It produces the same outcome regardless of who's at the top. Before you follow any leader, look closely at the system they're operating inside. Second, loyalty without accountability is not love. Evans cared about Joni, but he cared about her within a broken system, and that produced broken results. The most loving thing he could have done was name what the system was doing and refuse to enforce it. He did the opposite. And third, the people who pay the highest price are never the ones at the top. Marcus was protected through an affair. Joni inherited the apex. Evans got a new platform. Jonathan and Susie lost everything. The very people the system was supposed to protect were the ones it destroyed. Joni Lamb is gone.
The system is still standing, and someone needs to dismantle it before it finds a new apex and runs this whole thing back again.